to Going On to Maturity, a podcast series covering the elementary doctrines of the Christian faith. Please join us as we look into the scriptures of the Bible to further grow in our walk and relationship with God.
I want us to look at a scripture, unless you have a question or statement for us.
No, I would just like something that was sticking with me that you were saying earlier, and just now too. You said, God gives you, and I like the word that you use, grant, instead of, I went to college and stuff like that, and so there's a big difference between a grant and a loan.
Surely.
And I think sometimes we can get the perception that God loans us things. And if anybody is, a millennial like myself and understands that loans are terrible, like nobody likes Sally Mae. But if we're being honest about it, I've gone to school, I've gotten a degree or whatever. And then, Sally Mae will send you a congratulatory letter. Good job. You graduated. Here's 90 days before you have to start paying us back. It's amazing to know that God gives us something to come back to him. It wasn't, here's a loan. Okay, now you can kind of figure it out. And now we can kind of get on good terms. It was like, no, I'm giving you something because I want you to come back to me. I think it might be in Romans. It talks about, Jesus came for the reconciliation of man to God. He's that intermediate, that in between. And it's just overwhelming that God's love pursues us that much. He's like, I'm not going to give you a loan. I'm giving you a grant so that you can come to me, so that we can be reconciled and brought back to the unity in the place that, I designed it. So I just love that, you use that word grant for faith.
And that's what it is. It's something you don't have to pay back.
Yeah.
It's intended to grow.
Right.
And intended to enable you to understand everything that you're supposed to understand.
Yeah.
Because it is pursuant to revelation from God.
Right.
Again, there is a level of conviction, but true conviction, meaning that you can't be shaken, cannot be based in your own perception of things.
Right.
You can convince yourself of many things.
Yeah.
But as soon as conditions change to go against what you have convinced yourself of, that conviction begins to fall apart.
Right. Yeah.
When God convinces you of a thing, there may be some fear, there may be some other stuff going on, but you are convinced because you weren't the source of this conviction.
Right.
That's a world apart from what we're often taught.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about that even a little more.
Okay.
Pulling something from our initial discussion on this subject, the review, as it were. I talked about 1 Thessalonians 5:23, where it says, I pray God that your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless to the coming of the Lord.
Right.
3 parts to us. Let me say this parenthetically. All of these elementary doctrines are meant to do something to your soul, because that's where all of the lack of conviction, that's where all of the confusion, that's where demonic interference, all of that comes into play.
Right.
All right?
Yeah.
Now, when God convinces you of a thing, tells you a thing, any fear about it due to the circumstances around it are at the level of the soul.
Right.
And what God does, because he loves you, is he understands your state of being at any given time. All right?
Right.
And he works on your soul this way. He tells you something and he fulfills it.
Right.
He tells you something else and then he fulfills it. He tells you 7 other things and he fulfills them.
Right.
What's happening is you're developing confidence in God.
Right.
Because you find that he's reliable.
Right.
Then he tells you something else that seems to have no possibility of occurring. based on the circumstances that you're facing.
Right.
And what he's doing is taking a hammer and chiseling away at the primacy of your soul.
Right.
Because your soul is always weighing, how am I going to survive?
Right. Right. Yeah.
How am I going to be protected?
Yeah.
How am I going to come out of this?
Right. Right.
I'm looking at the circumstances. Ain't no way.
Right.
You've become, you follow the Lord enough now that you aren't going to say ain't no way in Gehenna or Hades, But even if you do,
Yeah.
that doesn't stop the show.
Right. Right.
God's intent is to disable that fear,
Yeah.
that confidence that's only in yourself and what you're able to see and discern with your natural senses.
Right.
What we talked about earlier in Hebrews chapter 5, that's not natural senses.
Right.
They come into play, but we're talking about senses beyond the natural.
Right.
And the only way for them to be developed is by reason of use. That's what that's about. God will purposefully do things that are beyond the scope of what looks like's going to happen. All right?
Right.
So that your confidence in him goes beyond the natural.
Gotcha.
You become fully persuaded.
Right.
In Romans chapter 4, you remember that God had said to Abraham, who had no children, he said, look here, your descendants are going to be like the sand at the sea. Let your mind go there. And if you pick up some sand in your hand, you realize if you only have a handful, there's a lot of sand there. There are a lot of individual grains.
Yeah.
That's an amazing promise.
Yeah.
He said to him, your seed, your progeny, your offspring,
Right.
your descendants
Yeah.
are going to be like the sand by the sea, like the stars in the sky.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right.
That's a crazy promise,
Yeah.
especially when you're 75 years old
Yeah. Yeah.
and your wife is about the same age.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And we know because their perception of their circumstance, they said, well, let's help God out.
Right.
You take this Egyptian girl, y'all go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Ishmael was born.
Yeah.
Now, after Ishmael was born, God returns to Abraham and says the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
And Abraham says, yo, what about Ishmael?
Right.
We took care of it.
Yeah.
Our soul, we took care of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Look at him.
Yeah.
He's a strong boy.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Lord says, yeah, he's all right. In fact, he's going to be like a lord over 12 nations.
Yeah.
He's going to grow up. I'll say some other things about him later.
Right.
The Lord would say. but I meant of your seed.
Right. Right.
I'm talking about of your DNA.
Yeah.
Your biological makeup.
Right.
And Sarah's.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we know if we read the whole story, Sarah laughed. He says, the Lord said you laughed. Oh, no, I didn't. But in Romans chapter 4, when this is rehearsed in shorter version, the scripture says that Abraham became the father of faith, or the father of the faithful, because he was fully convinced or fully persuaded that God was able to do what he had promised.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's really what faith is. God says something, and despite the circumstances, or even despite a mistake you made to try to fulfill what he said,
right,
he's still going to do it.
Yeah.
And inevitably, when you believe, it's done. Now, the time is a component, but it's done. And we know what happened thereafter.
Right.
He had a son.
Yeah.
Sarah had a son.
Yeah.
It wasn't Ishmael.
Yeah.
You read in Genesis, you read the whole story.
Yeah.
But the scripture says there in Romans chapter 4 that that's really what faith is. And if you read the story, it's the deal of God speaking to you.
Right. Right.
God showing you something. Some people might have thrown up their hands because I said God speaking to you. Listen.
Yeah.
The first thing you think is that you're incapable of hearing God.
Right.
Let me say to you in very plain English, that is absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
You were made to hear God.
Right.
whether you can point to a circumstance right now, an example right now, where you say, I know that I heard God, whether you can point to that or not, does not mean that you can't hear God. His intent is that you do, and with a lot of clarity. Let me point to some clarity for you. And this thing about hearing God is it's the crux of faith. Now, when I say hearing God, I'm not talking necessarily about the ears all the time. Hearing God or discerning God or perceiving God. You were made to perceive him. That's why you have a spirit. You were born to perceive God and to relate to him. And the only way that you can fully believe in him is if you hear him, perceive him, discern him. Everything else is your own work. Everything else is your own work. Look, there's a case in the book of Acts where Peter is essentially shown by God that I'm going to extend salvation to the Gentiles. Now, this is in Acts chapter 10. Understand that an Ethiopian man under Candace the queen, an African man, that was in Acts chapter 8. But anyway, in Acts chapter 10, this gift of salvation was extended to the Gentiles. All right? And there's this man, an Italian man, Cornelius. All right? Now, Peter is on a certain street, right? A certain street, and he has this vision. I won't go into it all because it takes a lot of time. But at the end of it, he realizes that some stuff that he had always believed, God is telling him is about to change. And then he hears from the Lord, said, there's some people at your front door. There's some people at your front door. Go with them, doubting nothing. And there are these Gentiles. Peter is a Jew. He never hung with the Gentiles. The law tells him not to do it. Don't eat with them. Don't stroll down the street with them. And now he's going with them to somebody's house. These men come to his door. He heard from the Lord that they are there. The Lord gave him a vision about receiving them that destroyed all of his teaching up to that moment. And it became the door to an entire race of people. Do you understand that you cannot follow the Lord without hearing him? You can't. I could point to a million examples in the scripture, but that's a deep one. You can have lifelong held beliefs that form the basis of all of your behavior. But God will speak to you and teach you in that moment that all that stuff it served its purpose, but it really is not my idea. Here's my idea. And it creates in that moment faith. It creates something that you will change the whole course of your life in a moment. Now that's what faith is. Faith is hearing from God and it creating within you a confidence that exceeds everything else that you've known about that matter. That's unshakable. And what happens is I started out this thing about, him telling you that he was going to do this and that. And he shows himself reliable. And your confidence grows in him. Then he does things that are harder. And harder. And what he's doing at that point is teaching you not to trust in your own soul. He's teaching you not to trust in your own soul. I have a story to tell, but I want to make sure that you don't have something to interject with before I go forward.
No, I mean, it's just interesting how it seems like our faith grows as we continue to perceive more of God. As you give an example, he'll do something at first, you're like, all right, that's impossible. And he does it. And he just keeps doing more and more seemingly impossible things. And that develops our confidence. It develops our faith because he continues to reveal more of himself through his word. And just over and over and over again. That's crazy.
When you read the scripture, you see God as all-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere at the same time. And it's amazing, but he knows that that's really hard for you to conceive.
Right, right.
I mean, I've walked with the Lord for many years, and it's still hard to wrap my mind around this idea that he doesn't have a beginning, that there was never a time that he wasn't.
Right.
That's hard for me to wrap my logical mind around.
Right, yeah.
But I don't have any doubt about it because of all of the things he's shown me over the years.
Right, yeah.
I just understand that because I'm born on a certain date and I go to work on certain days and I look for things but at a certain time that it's hard for me to conceive of, mentally, someone who's outside of that whole construct. Except with the things that he's taught me and the faith that he's created within me.
Right.
Now I accept it as a concept without trying to, logically explain it to people.
Right.
All right?
Yeah.
But here's an example of God doing something that increased my faith. Okay? Again, he gives every man, every human, a measure of faith from the beginning.
Right.
When you gasped your first breath, probably before then, when you were in utero, when you were in 9 months of amniotic fluid, God had already put it in you. But certainly by the time you were born, you had a grant of faith from God.
Right.
And he knew over the course of time, he would do certain things, cause you to meet certain people that would lead you to him. Okay?
Right.
Now, all of that had happened for me by this time. All right? But, now I'm walking with the Lord. It's been just probably a year or less walking with the Lord. And, when you've not walked with the Lord, one thing that, you take some shortcuts in life. You know, some of those shortcuts are legal, some of them ain't.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And
here's an illegal shortcut that I had taken. No one was harmed. No animals were harmed in the filming of this. But my father had given me a car. And, in every state, in every city, you got to take this car. You got to go down to DMV. You got to wait in long lines. You got to pay some money. You got to do all this stuff. You know what I mean? And so that it's legally yours and, everything's done decently and in order, to use scriptural terms. And so my father gave me the car, and I guess the dates on the tags, I forget what that is, whatever it is. It'll come to me probably when we're done taping. But there was time left that allowed me not to do that. Although it was in my father's name. I had keys. I parked it in front of my residence. You know what I mean? Which was not my dad's at that point. And so that was good enough for me. Right? Well, registration is what I was looking for. And so in the passage of time, that registration expired. And so I was going to have to do the whole 9 to get it in order. And I just kept putting it off. And I was living in D.C. at the time. I lived close enough to my job. I didn't drive to work. I walked to work. And this particular day, I walked home and looked at my car, and there was a ticket there. And it was $100. And I was like, oh, Jesus. Okay. All right. I know I'm wrong. I got to go take care of this. Right? Went to work the next day. Came back. And there was another ticket at about the same time from the same officer at the same amount. So now it's $200. I neglected to tell you that at this time, I had a busted flywheel in the car. So I couldn't move it. I had to get it fixed in order to do all these things to get it registered in my name. And, I'm trying to stack the money for that. You know. And so now day 2 is $200. I couldn't even start the car. For those of you that are mechanically inclined, not these newfangled vehicles, but the older ones. If you turn the ignition with a busted flywheel, you got the loudest noise in the world, and the car would not turn over. So you've just polluted. You just committed noise pollution, and nothing else was affected. And so I'm concerned now because it's $200. I make decent money now, bless God. Back then, I made good enough money for that stage of my life, but not good enough to continually, daily donate.
Stack up on tickets.
to DCPD. And so I went to work for the third day. I came back, and behold, yet again. So now there's $300 of tickets, and I'm thoroughly convinced that this will go on as long that this car is sitting there. I didn't have enough money to get the car fixed. Yeah. And, it wasn't a VW Beetle. Yeah. It was a Grand Prix. It would have taken more strength than I had to get this off the street without it running. Yeah. And so I'm walking up to my room in this home. I rented out the attic area, but it was finished. Right. And so as I climbed the stairs, I was very concerned. I was hurting because I knew this would happen again tomorrow. Right. I was perplexed and in pain. Yeah. And God is my witness. I heard the Lord say, "Go start the car." And I went, "Lord, you know the car don't start." He said again, "Go start the car." And so I turn around before reaching the top of the stairs, kind of mentally, this car don't start. What are you going to do? It's ridiculous. I'm talking this way. And I go to the car. Yeah. And I put the key in the ignition. I sit there like, this is crazy. This is not going to work. But I had heard the Lord say, "Go start the car." Right. So I knew at least I had to go to the car, put the key in the ignition, and turn it. Yeah, yeah. And so I turned the ignition, and then this crazy loud sound happened again. Yeah. And of course, I'm in the same condition. Yeah. And then I just kind of bowed my head and I said, "Lord, you told me to come start the car. Right. You know these tickets I'm getting. Yeah. You know that I can't fix the car right now. Yeah. I'm only sitting here because you said, right. So please." I put the key back in the ignition, turn. It sounded as if I had just bought the vehicle. Oh, wow. And I lived next door to my cousin who had a garage at the back of his house and a driveway. Yeah. So just to get it off the street to avoid officer consistent. Yeah. Right. I drove it to my cousin's driveway, and I talked with him later, and he allowed me to keep it there for some time. Yeah. That was amazing. Right. Here's another part to that story. I had a friend who was a mechanic. And when I put together enough money to where I felt like I could cover the cost of repair, when he pulled the flywheel out, it crumbled in his hands. Oh, wow. Yes, it broke apart in his hands. And then I told him the whole story just as I'm telling you. He wasn't a believer. He later became a believer. God does these things not just for you, but for others as well. That's real faith. Yeah. That's not me mustering up conviction by the power of self-hypnosis or something. Yeah. Or the power of suggestion. Yeah. Or what are the other terms? I don't know. You can come up with them. Right. But claiming it. I didn't claim that the car would work. Yeah. I didn't claim none of that. Yeah. The Lord told me, start the car. And so that's what real faith is. Right. And what happens is, and we're taking a long time to go through this because you need to know. Yeah. You've been taught incorrectly. Yeah. Real faith is the result of communication from God. Right. Now that communication can take the form of you reading the scripture. When you read the scripture and God shows you something that you didn't know, gasp. Right. Yeah. Faith is created. Yeah. I mean, unlike a vehicle where you can see the tank go from F to E, full, empty to full. Yeah. I said it the wrong way at first, but you may not be able to measure. The faith in some tank that way. Yeah. But it does change your behavior. Yeah. It changes the way you do everything. Yeah. I'm not shy to tell that story. Right. And I've got plenty more. Right. I won't tell them now. Yeah. But I've got tons of those. Yeah. Literally. And it's that experience that has made me who I am and caused me to think the way that I think. Right. Not just because I've attended a lot of meetings and carry a lot of Bibles of different versions. Right. God intends to interact with you for real. Right. He's not a concept, And faith isn't a concept either.
Right.
It is the result of him communicating to you.
Right.
And then when he's communicated to you,
Yeah.
you really believe because you know you didn't have that thought
Right.
on
Right.
your own.
Right. Yeah.
And when it works just like he says,
Right.
your confidence in him grows.
Right.
100 stories are coming to mind. I won't tell them all. But are you getting the idea
Yeah.
that faith is not just conviction that you muster up?
Right.
That it's conviction that's resultant of having heard from God.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely completely different perspective, like used to think, even for myself, just like, if I squeeze my hands and close my eyes hard enough, especially like for me, it's not really a long story, but, moments where you're like, oh man, I just got in trouble and I have to go home and I know my parents are probably going to punish me and discipline me, so there's God, please, God, please don't let,
bargaining,
right, exactly. It's like I'm gonna pray and believe just as much as I need to, and inevitably that never, anyways. But it's completely different. It's not like I have to gather up of enough coins to like try to give to God and like, all right, this is gonna work out. But it's rather going back to the grant example. He's giving you something to have an impact on your life and ultimately to have the impact on somebody else's life.
It's like everything else with God. You didn't get saved because of a statement you made. You got saved because you agreed with him about something he showed you. You finally agreed.
Right.
The idea of him saving you is older than your life.
Right.
And to the degree that we're deceived about our involvement or the results are a matter of our steps that we took.
Yeah.
Is to the degree that we are immature. And so, and we really haven't gone far into faith at all, but we've talked about what it really is.
Yeah.
Now, there's this other matter in the definition that we'll talk about and give some time to that.
Until the next episode, we hope that God blesses you to keep growing and maturing.